Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a pretty incredible masterclass in persuasion straight from the ancient world. We're going to look at how you build an absolutely airtight case against someone who is completely 100% convinced they've done nothing wrong.
And this sentence, this is really the heart of the entire accusation. It's the core of a super high-stakes drama we're about to unpack. And notice, it's not just about a simple mistake. It's about a fundamental, self-destructive choice. All right, so let's get into it. How do you even begin to tackle that? We're going to see exactly how the prophet Jeremiah took on this massive problem, not by using force, but with a brilliant, relentless rhetorical strategy that was designed to just dismantle every single defense.
So the entire argument is framed not as some dry legal dispute, but as a broken marriage. And that is so intentional. The prophet wants the audience to feel the message, to really sense the pain, the anger, and the deep, deep betrayal that God feels. It's personal.
Now, to really get Jeremiah's strategy, we have to talk about something called literary genres. I know it sounds a little academic, but trust me, we all use this skill every single day. It's just about knowing what kind of message you're getting so you know how to read it.
For example, right? If you see this headline, you don't start barricading your doors or calling animal control. You instinctively know the genre is sports news, so you get that Lions means the football team, not, actual lions. Well, in the exact same way, understanding the literary form of a prophetic text tells us what to expect and what the author is really trying to say.
And the specific genre Jeremiah uses here is what scholars call a covenant lawsuit. Now, this isn't just some angry speech or a rant. Nope, it's a formal legal proceeding brought against the people for breaking their sacred agreement with God.
This whole framework is absolutely crucial. It gives the message structure and a ton of authority. It sets up a clear plaintiff, a defendant, and, most importantly, a prosecutor who is about to lay out a case, piece by piece.
So let's look at the players in this courtroom. You've got God as the judge, Jeremiah as the prosecuting attorney, and the people of Judah as the defendant. Now, just imagine for a second being the defendant in a trial where the prosecutor is working directly for the judge. Yeah, you'd be in some very, very serious trouble. The odds are completely stacked against you before you even start.
Okay, so here's the critical question. How does the prosecution even begin to build its case against a defendant who is in total, complete denial? Well, Jeremiah doesn't just make assertions. He presents cold, hard evidence.
He builds his case on 4 really powerful pillars of evidence. Each one of these is a distinct rhetorical strategy, and they're all designed to systematically dismantle the defendant's denial, leaving them with absolutely no room to protest their innocence. Let's break them down one by one.
First up, the metaphors. Exhibit A. We've already seen the cracked cistern. Now, in a dry, arid land, a cistern that can't hold water is completely useless. This powerful image shows that their turn to idolatry isn't just morally wrong, it's totally futile. It's a broken system that can't possibly give them what they're looking for. Then he hits them with this really shocking animal imagery, comparing the people to a wild donkey in heat, just totally consumed by its passions, running wild. Now, this isn't just an insult, it's a diagnosis. He's describing a people who have lost all sense of reason and are just driven by these destructive, self-sabotaging impulses.
Next, Exhibit B. Jeremiah acts like a skilled lawyer, using these pointed rhetorical questions to force the people to stop and actually look at their own history. He asks, essentially, go ahead, tell me, what exactly did God do that made you leave? The question is brilliant because the only possible answer is silence. There is no good answer.
Then, he delivers this masterful comparison. He says, hey, look around you. Even the pagan nations, who worship idols that aren't even real, are more loyal to their false gods than you are to the one true God. I mean, what a devastating accusation. It just highlights how uniquely and shockingly unfaithful they've been.
All right, on to Exhibit C. The prosecutor, Jeremiah, basically puts the defendant on the stand and uses their own words against them. He points out this glaring contradiction. In one breath, they're protesting their innocence, right? I am not unclean. I haven't chased after false gods. But just moments later, they admit, it is hopeless. I've loved foreigners and I'm going to go after them. By quoting them directly, he exposes their profound self-deception for everyone to see.
And finally, Exhibit D. He uses the subtle but incredibly powerful wordplay in the original Hebrew. He says the people went after Hevel, which means worthlessness, and in the process, they themselves became Hevel, worthless. They prophesied by Baal, and they chased after things that do not Ya'al, which means prophet. The sound is almost identical. The message couldn't be clearer. You become what you worship.
So with all the evidence laid out, the prosecutor rests his case. The entire courtroom is silent, just waiting for the verdict from the judge. And the verdict? Well, it's overwhelming. Judah is guilty beyond any shadow of a doubt. But it's more than that. The trial has proven that their choices are just utterly futile. Their idolatry is foolish, their political alliances are self-defeating, and their denial is just hollow.
But then, just when you expect the gavel to fall and the harsh sentence to be handed down, the entire drama takes this incredible, completely unexpected turn.
The judge, having just proven his case beyond all doubt, doesn't condemn them from the bench. Instead, he invites the guilty defendant into his chambers to talk. He actually offers a path back. The lawsuit, it turns out, wasn't just about proving guilt. It was about opening the door to reconciliation.
And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. This ancient trial reveals a really profound truth about what it means to persuade someone. Sometimes, the goal isn't just to win the argument and prove you're right. Sometimes, it's about laying the groundwork so that a broken relationship can actually be repaired.